Welcome to the Evolution Arc Mindskillz Leadership Series, bringing together senior leaders from India and across the globe, real conversations that shape leadership in a rapidly evolving workplace. Today we have Poonam Barua. She's a distinguished global business leader, economist, and an independent board director, widely recognized for advancing women in leadership. She is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Will Forum India, a pioneering platform that has engaged over 6,000 professionals across 200 leading organizations. An accomplished author, her book, Leadership by Proxy, The Story of Women in Corporate India, highlights the evolution of women in India's professional landscape. She has authored multiple research reports, led multiple initiatives on ESG, board diversity, and gender equity. Through global forums, conferences, and mentorship programs, she has enabled over 500 women to become board-ready leaders. Her contributions span academia, policy, and industry, making her a leading voice in shaping inclusive leadership and governance worldwide. I'm really proud to have you with me, a good friend and somebody who I admire. My first question to you, Poonam, is, with your extensive work through Will Forum India and your research on women in corporate leadership, what structural changes do you believe organizations must adopt today to truly close the gender leadership rather than merely talk about diversity?
Thank you, Kavita. Most marvelous to have this session with you. I want to first compliment Mindskillz. I've been watching Mindskillz for a long time now, and this evolution arc is a very good idea, because what happens is that you begin at a particular point and then you evolve over time. And I call it a pivot. Actually, I don't call it an evolution. It's more like a pivot, because you got to keep on pivoting depending upon what the external forces are giving you. And in the same way, you keep carrying on your mission just as a little pivot. So my compliments to all of you, and I'm delighted that you have invited me. So, let me, I always begin by saying that when I started the Forum for Women in Leadership in 2007, which is almost 2 decades ago, I'm saying the same thing today. It's not about women. It's about leadership. This is one thing we have to get right, the language, the equation. So what are we really trying to do here is make sure that half of the world's population is the women, and they are not erased, they're not left out, their voices are not being just put into the sidelight. They become a critical part of leadership. That's actually the key to what I call shared futures. So that's the vision for shared futures. And without involving the women, you can't optimize your profits. You can't have wealth creation. You can't have what I call innovation. You can't have sustainability. You can't have even your response to the AI era. So this is the key. Actually, it's an economic and a business proposition, and that's the way you need to look at it. So what is it that is, according to your question, not allowing companies to get to where they need to be on the gender equation? So it is now in 2012, I still remember opening the Will conference. That was our 7th conference. And, my video is still up on the YouTube channel, where I'm saying that the CEO has to be the custodian of the gender leadership agenda. It cannot be dealt with by HR. It cannot be dealt with by your diversity officer. It can't. Unless the CEO, which actually means the board, unless the CEO says and adopts it as an agenda, that's the only way it can cascade down. It's not a bottoms-up approach. It is a top-down approach, which changes the whole culture of the company. The second thing, and I actually mentioned this in my book in a whole chapter, and it's called the gender maturity curve. 80% of the companies in India and maybe globally are falling below the gender maturity curve, which means that they're still not at the point where the CEO is the custodian. They're still at the starting spot, even after so many years, where HR and diversity are still the custodians. Therein lies the problem, that they don't recognize that they have to move up on the gender maturity curve. They can't just sit at the bottom and expect everything else to fall into place. So that's the way we need to look at it. And the third thing that the companies, so one is the CEO needs to be the custodian. Two, you have to literally look at yourself on the gender maturity curve, find out where you are, and make sure that you're evolving on top of the curve and not just hitting the bottom. And the third thing is that you got to have gender audit. Gender audit as an exercise has nothing to do with the number of women. Gender audit has to do with things like putting out a handbook on, say, best practices for women in the workplace. Since we're only discussing women, let us say you put out 50 best practices for women in the workplace. Your gender audit has to be such that you draw a random sample and you find out what your community and your employees and your stakeholders and your clients and your investors, anybody has to say on those 50 best practices. We've done this for a lot of companies. And so I know this is not an academic discussion. I know that you will actually get responses varying from anywhere near 20% to 80%, which means that the communication is not going down systematically down to the employees. And there is no such thing as 100% response on just about any best practice. In other words, do you have this best practice in your organization? We never get 100% response. So a gender audit is very important because it makes you understand whether you are mainstreaming the issue, not side issue, mainstreaming the issue. These are the three things that I think you need to bring into front and center instead of creating all the noise, which is all on the side and doesn't do anything about the center.
You've captured it beautifully. My second question to you is, in your book, Leadership by Proxy, the story of women in corporate India, you explored the evolving journey of women leaders. How has the landscape changed since its publication? And what new barriers or opportunities do you see emerging for the next generation of women leaders?
Very nice. Again, I am not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. But my optimism is very pragmatic because if we don't identify the problem, you can never get the solution. So the first thing is that, to my mind, as an economist, nothing has really changed at all. I say this because if things have moved from, say, 12% to 15%, or, women on boards has moved from 15% to 17%, the economist will say, okay, but 80% of the board seats are still occupied by men. That is how you need to see it. It doesn't matter whether a couple of percentage points have changed. Actually, in economics, we call it the error of margin of error. So the reality is that nothing has changed at all because 80% of the seats in CXOs, and I'm putting it in another way so that the impact is higher, in CXOs and CEOs and on boards are still occupied by men. Therefore, I think nothing has changed at all. Number two, what hasn't changed to me is the demand side of the equation. Everybody seems to think that the problem is on the supply side. They keep talking about the lack of qualified women, and I'm saying the problem is on the demand side, and that hasn't changed at all. It hasn't changed, or let's say it's changed very, very marginally, which I don't accept as changed when I'm looking at 25 years of the work I've done. So let us say that, the margin of error is 5 to 10%, but the supply side, you can keep on saying that there is 5 to 10% more women in STEM. Yes, but the problem is on the demand side. Even if you have 80% of the women sitting in your mid-level, you haven't moved them up to the next level. That is the problem. The demand side is a problem. Everybody keeps focusing on the lack of women who left their job. And I'm saying, but 80% are still sitting there. How come you did not promote them? The problem is on the demand side, and everybody has got to accept it. Now, regarding the opportunities, and I think that has changed. Since we started the Will Forum 20 years ago, what has changed is the opportunity for visibility. Women can now be heard. Okay, somebody like me who probably never got a chance to meet the so-called, men's club, or where the males were all hanging out in conferences. I'm not talking about small things. We were never invited. Today, we'll have 33,000 followers on LinkedIn. Okay, with 33,000 followers on LinkedIn, I know that I am already influencing a large community of people who are actually listening to what I'm saying. Now, that kind of visibility was not there for women, and it's a huge opportunity, and women are not leveraging it enough. They're not leveraging it enough, not because they're not smart. They're not leveraging it enough because there is a certain caution that the women need to apply. And I think it bothers them a lot. There is a lack of safety. With the AI, new era of AI is going to probably become a little more louder. And so what we need to do is to continue the other side of the equation, which is getting the women to get more visible, to speak with greater confidence, to be on the social media, and to have executive presence while they're on the social media, not just keep on posting things about their victim status or their lack of opportunity, but putting out new ideas about themselves so that they will get more followers on the content that they're putting out, on the intelligence that they're showing, on the strategy that they're showing. That's what we need the women to pick up on their opportunity.
So true. You've captured it beautifully. My last and third question is, as an independent board director and a strong advocate of ESG and diverse boards, what capabilities should senior candidates and executives cultivate today to become truly board-ready leaders in a rapidly transforming global business environment?
So the first thing is we need to get rid of the word board ready. There is no such thing. Okay. I've said this so many times, and I'm up on YouTube saying the same thing. There is board capable. There is board knowledgeable. I think we got to change the sentence and the language, and it begins with that. There is no such thing as board ready. Many board directors on the board are not board ready. And there are many capable and knowledgeable people who are not on the board. So therefore, I think we need to say, to your question, how is it that we can get the board knowledgeable and the board capable people, men or women, onto the board? That is essentially the question. And then you will see that there is no lack of supply. There is none, because you took away the word board ready. Board ready means that, okay, either you've got a lot of experience on the boards, and so you're board ready, or you have a particular skill. There is no skill that is needed on the board. The only skill that first and foremost if anyone understands what is corporate governance, and I've been doing this for 20 years, corporate governance, the fiduciary responsibility of the board director, especially the independent board director, is your most critical capability. And there is no way to measure it. There's no way to measure it. You only have to see the experience and the trust and the branding of the person, the transparency, the integrity that they bring to the table. That's the first thing you need to be board ready. How many nomination committees for boards are actually looking at this? That's my question. Number two, I have found that most boards are looking for a skill like marketing or like finance or like, maybe ESG, and that's the wrong thing to do. The board's job is not to run the company. The board's job is oversight. Oversight on the functions of the company and whether they are actually, giving out to the stakeholders what the company was set up for. There is absolutely no need to bring a marketing person because that the company already has. So these are the two things I want to put on the table, and that takes me to ESG. The thing about bringing ESG kind of people on the board is actually, again, the wrong thing to do. What you need are people who understand governance, the environment, and actually understand not social in the sense of social where, you talk about the social sector, but you understand that you are, let us say, the planet today. 6 out of the 9 boundaries of the planet have already been disturbed. You only got 3 more boundaries to go. And how much are you going? People need to understand these kind of questions about ESG. They need to understand the impact on the supply chain when you talk about ESG. Most of the people on the ESG level on the boards are only either CSR people, which is a mistake, or they are environment, climate, renew people, which is again a mistake. ESG means, are you capable of understanding shared futures for humanity? And then the components of that are ESG. And since we're talking about women, let me also put down very strongly that ESG is part of the UN 17 UN SDGs. And SDG 5 is gender equity. In none of the compliances has SDG 5 ever been audited as part of ESG. You see what I'm trying to say? They will audit all the other 60, but they won't audit gender equity, because if they did, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. They would make sure that gender equity was, and it's also number 5. It's not like it's at the bottom. So there's a lot to be done in terms of ESG. And I think that, it will happen not as a skill that you bring on the board. It will happen when people begin to understand what I call shared humanity, shared futures, which the boards are not doing right now because they're so involved in linear profit making, quarterly results. And I'm saying that's fine, but it's set up for failure. You can see where the world is going. It's not, neither business nor communities are optimized. You're actually setting yourself up for failure if you don't embrace ESG now, not tomorrow, now.
So it's really pleasure having you on this talk. And Poonam, each time I meet you, I have so many takeaways, because I would say that there's always a learning experience meeting you, Poonam. Thank you for taking out your time and being with us today.
Good luck to
Pleasure.
Mindskillz. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.